Thank you very much, Anna, and good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak here. What a great conference so far, and it's fascinating whenever I speak about education at an event such as this, the way you realize that although we didn't plan all of our talks together, so many of the themes link up, and so many of the things that have already been said in the first half link with things that I want to say in the next few minutes, and I do promise it will be a few minutes. I'm well known for being a little bit lengthy when I speak from time to time. It's funny, isn't it, that when we talk about things must change, we tend to mean somebody else has got to change. And we don't always look into ourselves. When my wife and I were first married, many years ago, nearly 30 years ago now, one of the things we loved to do was to renovate old houses to live in. We had to do that because we had no money, so we couldn't afford new houses. And one of the houses we bought to renovate was in Essex. None of you know where Essex is, so I'll tell you, it's over towards the east coast of England. And in this very old house, it was a bit of a rundown building. Outside in the back garden, there was a pond. And in that pond, as you tend to get, there were lots of tadpoles. Now, I'm not a scientist, but I know that tadpoles are supposed to change into frogs. And one morning I was out there having my morning cup of tea, because I'm British and that's what we do every morning. And I was drinking my tea and looking down at the pond, and I saw something which shocked me to the core. And I called to my wife, "Mrs. Puttock," I said, because I'm a teacher and that's what we do. "Come and look at this." And my wife, Ellie, is a biology teacher. And she came and she looked down at the pond and she said, "Oh, that's neoteny." I had no idea what neoteny is. And I have to say I'm incredibly grateful to a former colleague in the UK, Brian Carline, great teacher, who explained this all to me. Neoteny is what happens to animals when they take on some of the features of the adult without achieving full adulthood. So with this tadpole frog, it had all swollen up. Huge body, huge head, but little tiny legs and feet. It had grown, it had changed somewhat, but never fully changed. And of course, sadly, in the animal kingdom, you can guess what happens to animals that exhibit neoteny, and that is that they die. So our theme today is on the road, and I've chosen as my theme, education, the journey, or the destination. And as I was thinking about that, as well as thinking about my frogs and my tadpoles, I thought about a real journey. So at the weekend, my wife and I are going to spend a little bit of time together in Hoi An, up in the north of Vietnam. And I'm going from Saigon, from Ho Chi Minh to Hoi An, and of course, I've got two choices how to get there. I could fly, or I could drive. And because I'm a little bit lazy and we haven't got too much time, and I've only got a couple of days holiday, so I've chosen to fly there. But it goes without saying that if instead of flying, I'd chosen to drive, I would have experienced all the richness of Vietnam on the way. But by choosing to fly, I'm still going to get to that destination, but I could miss out so much along the way. And speaking to parents and teachers and even some of the students in the room, if I asked you to think about what do you think of when you think of education, you might think of something a little bit like that on the screen behind me. And traditionally and throughout my career, that is very much what education, particularly British-style education, has been. Students of the same age, all grouped together, going to school for the same period of time, going for the same times of the day, normally something like 8:45 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., following pretty much the same curriculum. Yes, maybe some options in the curriculum for IGCSE or for IB diploma, but more or less the same. And all coming out at the end with one thing in mind. And throughout my career, that was very much about the destination. And the destination, the purpose of education was to get to a great university, was to get a great job. And as Anna kindly mentioned, I've been a teacher for 32 years. It's what you do, and it would be pretty much the same career throughout your life. But the world is changing. You know that, I know that. The outside world is changing. The world around us is changing. The world of jobs and careers is changing. And so we've said, well, of course, schools need to change. And that's right, schools do need to change. And one of the great privileges of my job is to visit many, many schools that are already changing. But as I said at the beginning, so often when we talk about change, we talk about those people changing rather than this person changing. And speaking to the students in the room, and I suppose to parents and adults, another view we quite often have of education is a bit like that. So we as children or students come to school and open ourselves up to receive all the knowledge, skills, and understanding that our teachers give to us. And what I would suggest, and what my experience is to date, is to prepare ourselves for that fast-changing world of the future. We need to be less like the little birds with our open mouths waiting to be fed, but we need to extend the analogy slightly to jump out of the nest and go and look for ourselves, to look for experiences, to look for challenges, to sometimes fail, to take risks, to get it wrong, and then from that to learn and change. And one of the themes I heard consistently coming through in the first half of our conference today was very much that. It's actually nothing particularly new. Because if I think of my own experience at school, where at the age of 11 I was a relatively academic but not high-achieving student, I found myself and I found my motivation through things like sport and music and drama and debating and school adventures and experiences of learning, but nobody gave those to me on a plate. Nobody fed me with those things. I had to go and look for myself. It's very interesting. Mr. Fitzmaurice earlier mentioned that statistic from the World Economic Forum talking about for students entering grade 1 today, 65% of the jobs they enter have not yet been created. How do they know? How on earth does somebody know what has not yet been invented? And of course, there's lots of clever people have worked out that statistic, people far cleverer than me, but they're talking about what they know at the moment. And if there's one thing I've learned about artificial intelligence, is that it's not only reinventing the world, it's reinventing itself. And our concept of what is artificial intelligence and what computers and the world of technology can do are vastly changing all the time. Let me give you an example. One thing people have always told me is that however complex they are, computers can do routine tasks. Now, in my lifetime in education, my goodness, the definition of a routine task has changed 100% or more. You can't have more than 100%, but it's changed by a huge amount. Think of driving. Now, I live in Hong Kong. Before that, I lived in Beijing. I've spent the last day and a half in Ho Chi Minh City. In those three cities, you would not define driving as a routine task, would you? But yet, we now have computers that can do it. And in the future, of course, there'll be a whole industry built up around those computers, the new laws that will need to come with it. So artificial intelligence has redefined our future. And what I would say is to those students in the room and to us as teachers, and to those parents in the room is we simply have no idea what that future will hold. So what can we in schools do, and of course what can our students do, is to just grasp every opportunity, to try something new, to be like that drive from here to Hoi An rather than jumping on a plane, to experience the journey, and you never know what that journey might take you to. So yes, the world is changing. We in schools need very much to change, and I would suggest to my colleagues, to my fellow parents, because I have 3 children, and to our students, you need and we need to change our perspective on the world. But there's one other change I would like to talk to you about before I finish. And I ask the question, is it the journey or the destination? And one thing we all in this room have in common is we are either on the journey, actually we're all on the journey of education. If I gave you the figure of 264 million, I wonder what that figure would say to you. You might be thinking it's the population of a large country. I checked the other day, and apparently the population of Vietnam is approximately 96 million. There are, or there were, in 2017, 264 million children and young people between the ages of 6 and 17 that were not in full-time education and did not have access to education. Approximately evenly split, about 130 million girls and about 134 million young men, boys. Tomorrow is World Children's Day. It's been defined by the UN, and we, as you know, are working with UNICEF to promote World Children's Day. And the theme this year is twofold. It's about access to education, and it is about ending exploitation, violence, and abuse towards young people. And I'm going to finish with a very short video for you, because I've given, in my few thoughts on the journey or the destination, some thoughts about things that need to change for us and for our schools. But when I talk to young people, as Mr. Fitzmaurice said earlier, the one thing they all tell me is they want to make the world a better place. So I hope as you think about those 264 million and you think about World Children's Day tomorrow, you may be perhaps inspired to do whatever you can to help others start the journey. Thank you.
We as young people perceive the world in a different perspective. We see it as in our future.
There's scientific evidence already that the planet is going to deteriorate over the next 10 years. It's evident that in many countries there's people who are suffering unnecessarily. There's too much in other countries, so it's obviously important that we take action.
The global goals are the vision that I see our world in 2030. The goals are significantly important to our generation today. It will project what the future will be like for the younger generations.
I think the global goals are important because they're a way of achieving a better planet environmentally, socially, economically. Also a way of ending a lot of the big problems that we have in the world at the moment.
In order to create a sustainable future and where our kids and the generations can continue, we should really try to use our resources in the best way possible.
It starts with you and your change.
I think that one person can make a difference, but it needs to be a collective effort. It needs to come from them and from us. And it's not just an effort of younger generation or older generation. It's not just us working each other in our corners, but we really need to just intertwine with what generations do.
If you want a future, then you've got to take action now. We need everybody to do it to make a big difference.
Count me in.
Me too.
Me too.
And me.
I can make a difference.
And so can you.